Hello there, welcome back. Well, there's going to be a big old shakedown in our court system, potentially. In one news story, some jury trials could be abandoned for certain criminal cases in England and Wales under a radical overhaul proposed by ministers. This is because of a huge backlog of cases in Crown Courts. They have hit a record high. They'd apply to some criminal cases that are too serious for magistrates' courts, but not serious enough for the Crown Courts. And by reclassifying offences, extending magistrates' sentencing powers, certain trials could move to magistrates' courts, where essentially you'd have a judge and a load of magistrates who would then decide very quickly what the sentence should be or the punishment should be, and no need for a drawn-out trial with a jury. Meanwhile, there could be the introduction of specialist courts focused on breaking the addictions of prolific offenders. These are the sort of main recidivists, as they're called, people who repeatedly commit the same crimes, which are normally fueled by things such as drug addiction, theft, shoplifting and drug dealing. Is this going to solve our problem? Should we be welcoming this, or do we have some concerns? Let's speak to Chris Daw KC, a leading barrister and author of Justice on Trial. Chris, my gut feeling about both of these proposals, if I'm honest with you, is they seem relatively sensible. But my main question is, if you're going to get rid of juries, and well, not all juries, but move some cases down to the magistrates' court and have them tried without a jury, and increase magistrate sentencing powers, what sort of crimes are we talking about here?
Well, we don't know yet, and I'm very interested in how you've come to the conclusion that it's broadly sensible. I'm very interested in what makes you say that, because I'd say it's broadly ridiculous.
Oh, really? You're the expert. You're the expert, not me.
Precisely. That's the danger, isn't it, of media commentary, which begins with a very broad kind of acceptance that something's a good idea, when actually you don't have a clue whether it's a good idea or not.
Well, I just admitted that you were the expert, and I'm asking you. That's why I've got you on the programme.
Maybe rather than making those sorts of statements at the beginning and comment, just saying this seems like a broadly good idea, only do that if you actually know it's a good idea.
I'm asking you to tell me. I said you're the expert. That's why I've got you on to me. I said it seems like a good idea, but I don't know. So you tell me.
I'm not sure why you said that. But
because
anyway,
it just seems we need to get rid of the backlog, and if there's these long drawn out trials and it's been deemed that it might not be necessary to have them tried by a jury, maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. You tell me. That's why you're here on the programme.
All right, well, let me tell you why it's a bad idea. Firstly, the idea that you introduce an entirely new court structure, presumably nationwide, to sit between the Magistrates' Court and the Crown Court is, frankly, it sounds like the biggest waste of public money, a massive recipe for administrative overload, huge numbers of extra staff and civil servants and judges and all sorts of new buildings, presumably, and God knows what. We don't need a new court structure. We just need to fund the one we have. And it works very well. We've had jury trials in this country for almost 1,000 years. And everybody knows that if they're accused of something serious or something where their reputation is on the line, like fraud or theft or something like that, you have a right as an English citizen to elect to be tried by a jury of your peers. We've had that right, as I say, for around 1,000 years. And the idea that you simply scrap it because neither the previous government nor this government are willing to fund the Magistrates' Court and the Crown Court to sit the days that are available. We have a situation at the moment where thousands of courtrooms lie empty every day, where there are judges actually available to sit in the Crown Court who can't because there's no one to staff the court, or the heating doesn't work, or these are the real reasons we have over 70,000 cases in the Crown Court backlog. And the idea that somehow by tinkering with magistrates' powers, or God forbid introducing an entirely new level of the court system that no one's ever heard or seen before, is the recipe for these fundamental, long-term, systemic problems with underfunding of criminal justice is simply wrong. What we need to do is make the system we have work. And if people want to prosecute lots and lots of people and have more and more people in prison for ever longer periods, which is often called for in the media, we're going to have to face up to the fact we're going to have to pay for that. And it's going to cost tens and tens of billions. The real question is, why are we so addicted to using the criminal courts and the prisons to solve every single one of society's problems? And it's simply nonsense, and it doesn't work.
I mean, that actually links quite well to this other story, and thank you for giving me that answer. I had no idea there were living courts available and judges sitting there but not doing their job because there weren't admin staff and heating not working. See, this is why we get our guests on. I did not know this. But what about this idea of specialist courts proposed to break break addictions? Because we know there's a huge rate of recidivism when it comes to certain crimes, particularly drug-driven crimes. This government are talking a lot about whether everybody should be sentenced to a custodial punishment, or whether or not there are some people who actually just need help. They've been brought up in a chaotic environment, and perhaps what they need actually is people who can really monitor their addictions, help them out of that, break that cycle. There are some people who end up going to prison, who end up more hooked on drugs and deeper invested into the criminal underworld than they were before they even went in. Do you think this idea of having specialist courts who would be focusing on breaking the addictions of prolific offenders is a good idea? Or again, is this like we don't need a neo-system that's going to be another layer of bureaucracy, another sort of admin overload, but we just need to better fund what we already have?
The real problem, and you're absolutely right, the real problem in this country is that half the people in our prisons, if not more, are people who suffer from either an addiction to alcohol or drugs, often a very long-term and chronic addiction, or some other form of serious mental health problem like chronic long-term depression, schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder. And there are tens of thousands of people in our prisons who are in exactly those conditions. And unfortunately, they are the people who come out of prison, go out, I'm afraid, and commit shoplifting and other forms of acquisitive crime in particular to fund drug habits and other addictions. And those people, really, the problem is that we shouldn't have them in the prisons in the first place. We have to deal with those who are in prison, and we have to deal with those who are arrested. But I have been in these courts because these experiments have already been done. And I've sat and I've watched as these people are dragged before a judge in a wig and gown. These are completely chaotic and dysfunctional people with a lifestyle that none of us, or many of us, can't even imagine, living between homelessness and prison and hostels and so forth and all the rest of it. If those people, when they first came into contact with the police and criminal justice and it was identified that they had an addiction or an alcohol problem, if those problems were addressed then with effective mental health and addiction intervention, they wouldn't be anywhere near the criminal courts. They wouldn't be clogging up our court system. They free up more court time and judicial time to deal with the backlog in particular. And can I make this point? The biggest victims of all of this are victims of crime. They are the victims of rape in particular and sexual offending in particular, who have to wait, on average, listen for this figure, 5 years from when they are raped to give evidence in court against their attacker. Unsurprisingly, only 1 or 2% of them are left at the end of that 4 or 5 year period, and 90% of reported rapes never get anywhere near a courtroom. These are the problems we need to be grappling with. Specialist sex courts to deal with rape cases within 6 months of the attack. Because no one, I mean, I've acted for women who have been raped and have had to wait for 4 or 5 years to get justice and see their attacker put away, and been ripped to pieces in the process, often by the police and the prosecution asking them intrusive questions. Yeah. There are all manner of problems with our criminal justice system. But when it comes to drugs and alcohol, we are treating these problems and mental health problems as being criminogenic problems that need a criminal response, rather than what they really are, which are medical issues that need a medical response. And we don't have psychiatric or addiction services that can remotely cope with these people, so we end up spending 50 grand a year to keep them in prison instead.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, prison's a sanctuary rather than a sanction. Chris, I'd love to have you back on to talk in particular about rape and the way we try it and those backlogs. It's a subject very close to my heart.